Hello, and glad you're all here today. Let's just, we were all, I think those of us who were online, were all at the Green Fair. So why don't you introduce yourself and say something you heard at the Green Fair that was interesting. What you got? Oh, Matt, how about you? You're muted. Okay.
I don't know. You always have very specific icebreakers that are difficult. Um, uh, I mean, aside from the fact that like carbon isn't causing climate change, I mean that's the most interesting thing I heard at the Green Fair.
Yeah, we all heard that guy. Okay, somebody else. Linda, what about you?
Wow, that's really hard. I was so busy talking to people about what we were doing, I wasn't listening to what they were saying.
We're supposed to be having conversations, Linda.
I know, it was a chance to let people know what we were doing. So I let them know.
Okay.
And they were happy to hear
it. All right. Anne, how about you?
Yeah, I had some lovely conversations, but mostly just getting to know people. Met a person who has moved into our community recently. She and her spouse are long-term environmentalists. Her spouse is a fire crew boss for the Forest Service. And so they have been, looking around the Horizon View neighborhood going, this is pretty flammable. Have we had discussions yet about urban wildfire in our community? And so that leads to, in terms of this group, we've been working on getting a climate action plan together that has basic elements in it. But my hope is that as we evolve as a community, we do start looking at some of these risks proactively. Because the couple had been down in the Eugene area, which is where I did a lot of my early forestry work, and boy, everything burned. I mean, that was just a terrifying burn, and it was lots of valleys coming down the Cascades, and it got very close. I mean, towns that were in the drainages burned. Blue River just burned. So cool conversation, something to look at in the future.
Resiliency, it's in the resiliency.
Resiliency, exactly.
Yeah. It's interesting you bring that up because I live on the edge. It looks like a forest, but it's actually private property from the people across the creek from me. It's had 3 owners in the 40 years we've lived here. No one has ever taken care of it. And every summer, my husband goes out with the hose when it gets really hot and tries to, wet down everything that's close enough to our property. I mean, we're talking a lot of big trees. So we take it upon ourselves to take care of it because the owners never take care of it.
It'll be a strategy that we discuss with our local firefighting teams. We have an excellent fire department, but they focus on residential structural fires.
Okay, Tracy.
On point, I've been in contact with Kristen Bowles, who is the Region 6 of 10 State Private and Tribal Forestry, Fire Fuels, and Aviation Management person for the Forest Service. And basically, I'm going to be talking to her again about urban wildfire hazards and how we assess them in the city. So,
yeah. Okay. We're just, the question is, except for Jessica, who wasn't at the Green Fair, where the question was, what do you hear at the Green Fair? That was interesting. I talked to a lot of people about laundry, just have to say, and how much those sheets work, and if they worked or they didn't work, and so people do a lot of laundry. That's what I.
And they like the sheets.
They like the sheets.
I can follow on the fire thing. there was an engineer who came up and I was talking about the box that Sarah's box that she'd built. And he said, can I share with you some of my ideas about this? And so he suggested placing a garbage bag on, just having one filter, one fan, attaching a garbage bag, duct tape it to the other end. The air flows through and cut a hole in the end. He had some dimensions, so sorry, I don't have them, like 8 inches, blah, blah, but a hole in the end so the air flows through it and doesn't just recirculate in the fan. And so making it a more efficient tool for people in their homes when they build these air purifiers themselves. So I thought it was a nice addition to our repertoire of how to make fan boxes to purify the air.
It'll be needed if there's wildfires, right?
Good.
So Jessica, got anything that tickled your fancy in the last week about the environment?
Unmute.
You can pass, because it was a pretty specific question.
I'm gonna pass. I mean, I work in the environment every day, as all of you know, but I am nothing that, yeah, nothing inspirational at the moment.
Right. Okay, so
Skip Brian.
oh, Brian.
They're gonna get away with it.
Well, I thought I was excluded because I wasn't part of the climate action booth.
Oh, right.
But
You were there.
I was there, yeah. Actually, I found out how people in Lake Forest Park love to rat on each other, man. There was a lot of people calling people out, or this guy's dumping a lot of stuff in the creek, you know that? It's like, well, okay. You know, I'm not the police, but thanks. Actually, I did hear, you know, this sounds like bad news this last week, but I'm actually looking at a positive. You guys may have heard, because of the polar ice caps melting, we're actually rotating slower as an Earth because we don't have the weights at one end to keep us spinning. So in 2027, they're actually, or 2028, they actually have to slow the atomic clock down to catch up with the rotation because we're spinning slower. So in other words, we're going to stop time for 1 minute or something like that. And we're going to be able to just live ethereally for 1 minute. I thought that's pretty cool. I'm not sure what's going to happen, but it should be close to Y2K. I don't know. And by the way, Sarah, I got to say, you got a smudge on your screen, but it makes you look very ethereal yourself. It's kind of cool. I don't know.
I've been kicked off. I can't, for some reason, I'm kicked off, so I can't see myself.
Well, when you come back on, you might want to maybe wipe down your
That's
camera.
Who I am. That's me. That ethereal.
Okay.
Mark, do you have anything you want to throw in? I'm going to ask you too, Corey.
No, but I downloaded today with our new urban forest planner who attended with the tree board and heard some good things, mostly tree centric, but that helps with climate action plan.
Okay.
Yeah, she was there at the book fair.
I said, yeah, she was at the booth next to us.
Yeah.
Corey?
I don't know. I thought it was a good turnout. Everyone seemed to be fairly good spirits and not too many negative comments for the day. So good event.
Yeah.
Got people thinking.
Good. Okay. Is there did everybody have a chance to look at the agenda? Is there any objection to moving forward with it? Matt, I think you said something, but I couldn't. You're muted. Are there any objections to the agenda? Any objections to the agenda? Any objections to the agenda? Okay. We have in front of us the minutes from the special meeting that was on February 29th. We don't have last month's meeting. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes? Linda, okay, second. Right, okay. Do we have anybody who's making public comment?
No.
No public. Okay. So we have a I don't know. I'm gonna tell you how old I am. Not actually, but tell you what. Well, I will if you want. When I was a child, there was the Ed Sullivan Show was on, and one of the stupid acts in the Ed Sullivan Show was they'd get a guy who'd had 5 or 6 sticks, and on top of each stick, he'd have a plate, and he'd begin to spin the stick, and the plate would there, and then he'd go to the second one, and the plate would go there, and they'd get the third one, and the plate would go there, and then the first one would stop spinning, and he'd go back. I feel a little bit like we got 3 or 4 plates spinning. But like the guy on Ed Sullivan, he kept them all going, and hardly ever did anything crash to the ground. I wanted to sort of catch people up on what went on in our subcommittee meetings. So do you have that? Can you, I am totally off the internet now. So can you post the chart with the extra column in it?
Do you have that? I don't have it up. Where is it?
That was the link in our email Sunday.
Okay. Yeah.
So as with somebody's trying to get it up, I met with subcommittees of each of you to do what I had to go back and listen to the last meeting to see what we said we would do. And I think what we said we were going to do was we were going to meet in the areas of our strategies and actions. And in that, we were going to look at our strategies and actions and say to the Planning Commission, where do these go in the planning document? And sometimes we just integrated them in. Sometimes we said there's a new policy. And sometimes we said, we don't know what to do with this. Think about it in the future. So Ann and I met on transportation. Matt and I met on buildings. Brian and I met on environment. And Mimi and I met on something else. Resiliency. So all of those are now in a chart that that sort of shows where each of the subcommittees inserted. We passed that on to both Mark and Christina, who was the consultant who was here before. So if you scroll down, who's got that? Can you scroll down just a smidge here till you see the strategies and actions? So what we did here was use the existing comp plan, the 2015 comp plan, I mean, and then we said where in that document it would be inserted. So like anywhere, just ones that there, it says eliminate gas-powered vehicles and tools. We thought that was a new policy. So we identified a new policy and gave it to the comp plan people. So we did that for each of the areas using the existing, so we used 3 things. We used the existing comp plan, we used our strategies and actions, and we used the kind of language that Christina had, the chart that Christina had given us to begin with. So I don't know that there's a way in this meeting we can actually go over those from person to person. I mean, I don't see a way we can look at the whole chart as a group, but I invite you to look at those if you want to look at what we did in those. Does that make sense? This is like a test. Now you have to say back to me what I said.
Take a look at the tables.
Take a look at the tables, yes. Yes, we're in the tables. And they're in our original document, and they're in the comp plan's original document, not in our revised document. So I think so I guess, Mark, the question is, you're Christina, now what?
You've sent this is ready to send to Mark.
He has it. I sent him a link to it and I sent Christina a link to it. And I know Christina got it because she said, could I give the transportation ones to somebody? We said, sure.
Yeah, and it's been shared. So do you want me to give an update on the comp plan and the discussion at PC, or I'm not sure what you're asking?
I'm asking, now we did this work, now what?
Well, to start with, at a very broad level, your climate action plan is very good, but it's fundamentally different than a comprehensive plan. And we've agreed that what policy is in here that may stay in here between now and May when it's hopefully adopted, but it has to be considered by council first, is already being reviewed and potentially looked at for incorporation into the periodic update with the Planning Commission. That's between now and June. Time is disappearing fast. So we've agreed to that because of that timeline, even though the Climate Action Plan is not officially adopted by City Council. So we can't get too specific, but Christina did share that information forward with the sub-consultants. They have it now. We haven't made any specific changes, but it's being considered in that framework.
So we're, if I looked at the planning commission agenda and it looked like they were talking about housing and then the bulk of it is about housing, but there was a line about climate.
It potentially. They have a series of special meetings along with their regular meetings through June. And we're just getting to the 5 documents for housing. Housing is a big change in the comprehensive plan. So this Thursday night, we're going to try and, with the Planning Commission and no consultants, talk through the materials to the best that we can. If there's room left over, we put placekeepers in there for transportation and climate. Transportation's easy. We don't have strikeout underlined from Fair and Peers, so it's likely that we can further the conversation about the existing element in the complex, but not by much. It's only 2 hours. Now, the regular meeting is next Tuesday. Will be taken up primarily by housing. We need to get through that beginning of April. May and June are critical. Can't believe they're on our doorstep. But if we get through housing adequately in April, then we have a chance to revisit all the other elements and go from there, which I believe they intend to do.
And that meeting is Thursday, or when is that? When is their next meeting? I thought it was Thursday. Is that incorrect?
They have a special meeting April 4th, Thursday night, 7 p.m.
Okay, so one of the questions is, so you, okay, so should we email this on to the planning commission? Or is
No, it's not on the agenda Thursday night or Tuesday night.
it is on the agenda Thursday?
Not your spreadsheet or specific policies.
Oh, right, but the issue of climate is on there, right?
Yeah, and so whatever time we have, I know that we have to talk about an item that's at the end of your agenda tonight for the CAC. So I'm not sure we're going to have anything but a short update on where we're at with climate. And I could update them on climate action plan or anything that feedback you have tonight. But they're not going to get new materials. They have 150 pages of housing materials to chew through by Thursday. And we have a new House bill that's been signed, so it slightly changes the materials we already have. But I can summarize it with the policy portions of your climate action plan. If they proceed in April and May and end up in an adopted council-approved climate action plan, can be grafted into the periodic update of the comprehensive plan in the existing elements as it currently is formatted. But I don't know if you want me to go further into what that means. Vision, mission, goals, policy, that's a comprehensive plan. Then volume 2 is the background analysis. It's more data and narrative. What it's not is an action or implementation plan. And that's the fundamental difference between the climate action plan and the comp plan. You can't make the comp plan the climate action plan. It's two separate things, and it's not. I point that out not to undervalue your climate action plan. It's just a different instrument. It has a different purpose.
Right, but and I just my recollection of the last meeting was that that Christina was interested in whether or not some of our items that we had in our strategies and actions were in fact policies that could be inserted into the comp plan. So we're just giving that to you now.
Exactly, but remember that city council hasn't had this, and we're not going to be much out in front of them. We're willing to consider and be prepared, but until the climate action plan goes to council, it really it's just a draft.
We got it. Yeah.
So it's sensitive in timing, but everything has to overlap. So we're trying to facilitate.
Okay. There was some discussion about having a joint meeting, and that's not happening, right?
They like the idea. They'll hold it as an idea in the future. They wanted to see what's happening with the climate element, but given their 6 special meetings and regular meetings and the volunteer nature of what they're doing and the length of the material, they cannot see an opportunity between now and June. Their worry is that what they already are faced with wraps into July, which would be a little bit of panic.
Got it. Okay. So did you want to do so that option? Yeah, I think that's sort of where we are with this piece.
But I will mention one thing: the community survey is live for the comprehensive plan. We did a citywide mailing. Hopefully, those postcards started hitting a lot of mailboxes this weekend. I haven't seen one yet. I'm hoping a resident will hold one up and confirm it because we paid for it. But that survey is live. It informs the planning as we go forward, and it's based on the new legislation, changes that are mandated, and the visioning work that was done locally last year. And it's meant to be brief. It's not meant to take a lot of time, and so it had to really focus questions on transportation and housing. But I would encourage you to go ahead and take it, and I could share the link if you haven't gotten the postcard or the e-news.
This is the one where you get $500 if you put your name in it. Okay, I did that.
That's it.
Okay.
So that's immediate, and then we'll know more as we get through April. I'm not pulling my hair out yet, but I know on May 1st I will be.
Okay.
May is a scary word.
Fun to see. Okay. So did you? I think I got an email from you that said you also wanted to update us on the grant and the advisory committee.
Yeah, if you want to take them in that order, it's at the end of your agenda, but I can speak to it now.
Yeah, then you can go home.
If you're, I know you're familiar, but we've received a $500,000 grant from Department of Commerce, and that is to do an actual climate element in the comprehensive plan. It's not due for Lake Forest Park or King County until 2029. But they had extra range on the grant funding, and the city was awarded. A week ago, the city council approved a resolution accepting that grant. And I'm drafting an RFQ to circulate in April to hire a consultant. So those are the immediate things. A lot of the grant will overlap with the climate action plan, a lot of the work that you've done. But it's very a specific thing: vehicle miles traveled, greenhouse gas study, and so that 500,000 can be used for various things, but primarily it needs to satisfy the scope and the requirements of commerce. That is due the deliverables and an actionable draft climate element for the comp plan by June of 2025. And so you're looking at the periodic update going until December, satisfying commerce, getting certified, moving on, and immediately turning around and doing another comprehensive plan amendment specific to the climate element. And so any policies that we take from the climate action plan and put in the periodic update are likely to stay in there, but may get put somewhere else in the climate element along with everything else. Planning Commission will be doing that amendment through June of next year. Then City Council has some time to consider it and put it in place. The opportunity is that we get reimbursed for that work. So we're taking advantage of the grant. The grant application and the scope of work and how we intend to go forward with a consultant includes a very first step, which is formation of a climate policy advisory team. I was tasked with what can that consist of? I haven't found any code that says you must have a policy advisory team. But it needs to consist of people in the community, volunteers that have that expertise that can work with the Planning Commission, because the Planning Commission does the actual comprehensive plan amendment. So they can't be taken out of the equation. So what I formed for council and introduced last week is a temporary task force between whenever, if it's approved, and when the climate element effort is over for the grant, to help the Planning Commission and the Climate Action Committee to form this product, to this element. And it's at policy level again, but it's very specific to climate, has those studies. It will definitely have goals and policies. And then the discussion can be, where can we branch out within that? We'll look at other cities, other examples, and see how much of an action-oriented document can it be. So it's kind of new territory for me, but that's really where the CAC's work comes in. So what we were asked at council last week is, can we go to the CAC, to the tree board, to the Planning Commission, and discuss this formation, the creation of that team? The way it's set up is up to 3 members of the CAC, up to 3 members of the Planning Commission, suggested 1 member of the tree board, and suggested 2 members of the public. And then a council liaison would serve along with possibly an alternate. So that's the structure. They are hoping for some feedback on that. The primary reason it is constituted that way is if we have up to 3 of the CAC and you have the bandwidth, the most interested members of the CAC can separately do this team while the CAC is doing their regular work. Same with the Planning Commission. They are not stopping with a comprehensive plan between now and the end of 2025. So they need to exist as a group. The advantage with a consultant on board with this grant money and this separate team is we can force multiply. All you need to do is find a meeting that everyone could, or a meeting night that everyone could attend, and this new task force can consist. The alternative is to not do that. Planning Commission would still be involved because they do the amendment, and then looking at a joint situation and finding the bandwidth, the time to fit everything else in that can't be set aside. So that's the structure, and council is hoping between now and next Thursday to get some feedback, and I'm starting tonight with you. So I'm open to any feedback. Tracy was there last week, and if he has any questions or specific comments, that would be welcome too.
Folks, got anything?
So this is Anne. It's everything we could ask for. Having a collaboration between all of the existing committees that need to cooperate on this, and also members of the public to try to help guide this process forward, understanding that the Planning Commission will be tasked with actually designing the element and finalizing the element, but having an opportunity to collaborate and guide that would be excellent. I also agree completely. This group has to continue on with the action-oriented stuff that really there's no reason to wait on a lot of these issues. So just carry forward with doing that. It will always be a challenge to find a time to meet, but that's, somehow volunteers rise to that challenge.
And I just to tack onto your comment, it's likely to last a year and a half. So it is a heavy commitment. It's not asked of lightly.
Yeah.
When does it start? Now?
As soon as possible. We're going back with feedback on April 11th to City Council, and it's possible that night they could waive third reading and take action. My hope is that we have direction in April while I'm doing the RFQ for the consultant, and that somewhere in late April, it all meets up and we've satisfied our first step already.
Is there anybody who has any objections to this, or suggestions or comments on it?
Did you say the water board was part of it, or whatever they're called?
My suggestion was one member of the tree board.
Isn't there also a water commission or a water, no? Who are they? Water district. Water district. Okay, so they're not, because they were talking up their climate action stuff at the Green Fair. Okay, just.
And that makeup is primarily for administration, right? We don't want to have to notice everything for a quorum of the Planning Commission, a quorum of the CAC. It's a separate task force that has, can take on its own course. Others can be invited in. They're public meetings. So if you want representatives from stewardship or from the water district or the sewer or the region or King County, that they can be brought in and participate. They just wouldn't be officially on the task force.
Makes sense.
And Mark, I missed, when are you thinking about constituting it?
No.
Do you want the names of people?
No, that's my plan is to go to tree board tomorrow night, go to planning commission, get through housing, and ask them the question at the end of their meeting. That will constitute my feedback. Then I'm ready for city council next Thursday. I don't need to do a report or any update other than attend on the 11th, give that feedback, and I'm hoping that it's favorable, and then see where we go from there. What I haven't done is ask for nominations or see who's most interested or develop a process on how we achieve that. Until last week when I was at council, I found that I had assumed, of course, everyone's going to want to do this. And that night, as I was talking, I realized, what if we don't get enough people? So I'm really hoping that this comes together. I'll move as fast as we can with the council and then constituting it. In the documents that are going back on the 11th, I inserted the words up to. So instead of fixating on 3, 3, 1, and 2, let's see what we get. And I hope the interest is there.
Okay. Any other comments on this?
Oh.
Tracy, go ahead.
Just Mark, when you were speaking to council, and we really appreciated the report. There was the question brought up by, I think, one of the council members about whether the high school members that we don't have right now of this committee would be eligible to serve on that team. And did we arrive at a resolution on that?
The council member Riddle asked the question, then I commented, normally I would say yes, why not? But before this climate grant and concept and team and additional however many nights a month that it's going to cost in my life, I'll be honest, I was already worried how we're going to do this over the next 2 years. And so I've done the educational component with UW and architecture school, business school, and I really favor it and wish we could do it. But administratively, it's going to add to the burden. There's only certain things that position can do. They can't help with administration and minutes, and they just don't work for the city. And so the words I used last week were I think professionally we're going to need to move nimbly. There's a lot happening over the next 2 years, and if we can stop adding to the plate in some way, it would be helpful. But I am a big fan of that. I just would not have time to recruit, administer, coach, mentor, facilitate feedback. But that's not a knock against that model. It's very valuable. I just don't see the bandwidth.
But you don't object to having high school students on the committee?
That's what he said.
No, that's what I mean. Yeah, the logistics of committee members and holding meetings and notices and materials is difficult. And I already have a lot of committees. I have no objection for participation and attendance and awareness or input, feedback. Absolutely not. But I would just hope we don't add to the administration of the makeup of
It can
the.
be welcome as community members to
Yes.
sit on the side. So if we could actually find people to be on our committee.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We have 2 spots open that aren't filled. So.
I thought you found one.
I talked to one, I'm gonna go, but he's told me I'd go to his class again.
But somebody, you talked to somebody at the Green Fair.
I know, I've talked to him before. He said,
I
oh,
a student.
he said, he did, he said, oh, I have your phone, I have your phone number in my
Bella,
paper.
is that the one?
Yeah.
Oh,
So we'll see.
I thought that was a student.
Yeah, it was a student. Oh, okay. So I think what we're saying is we're kind of interested in this, although in the structure that you're proposing. All right, is that the feedback we're giving them?
We're supportive.
We're supportive.
Okay, I'll give that feedback now. The move nimbly part. I can't presuppose what'll happen on the 11th, but I have faith. If all good, I don't necessarily want to wait until all the first meetings in May just to start the conversation. So whatever opportunity we have to make up that team and do the logistics and setting it up before the next round of meetings, before May, would save time ultimately, because the climate work itself shouldn't wait.
Well, how about I send out an email to folks and see if who's interested? Is that what you're asking?
Or start the conversation, yeah. Without a serial meeting, start the conversation, and then I'm waiting for the 11th until a resolution's passed. This is just a concept. As soon as the resolution is signed, then whatever preparation or word of mouth has gotten around would just be very helpful.
Yeah, I'm not suggesting serial meeting. I'm just saying surveying who would be interested in being on that committee.
Exactly. And it's legislative, so it's not like you can't turn around in the grocery store and talk to somebody about it. This is not quasi-judicial, but still open public meetings, do it in a meeting setting in the light of day and so forth. But that discussion should be happening as soon as we have a consultant on board. It won't take them long to begin work.
Okay.
Oh, and now I forgot the words I wanted to add. It's escaped me. Oh, being new to the city, nominations need to be brought to the city council. So we can do that process, do whatever it takes to have this list through the mayor, but the mayor needs to bring nominations to the council for official, whatever the word is. I don't want to say appointment, formation of the task force.
Okay, I'll send out an email and solicit participation and then send that to you and Corey.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, is there anything else that we need Mark for? Okay. You can stay. You're welcome to stay.
But you don't have to.
You don't have to.
I'll stay. I want to hear about the climate action plan. That'll help me. Thank you.
So I did want to bring people up to date on where we are in the climate action plan. And the answer is, well, we're still working on it. The good news is that we got sort of an extension of time that we could work on it. So we have until, Corey, can you help me? When is the?
April 12th.
April 12th.
Next Friday.
Yeah.
Next Friday. So Jessica and Brian and Mimi and I have been looking at that document they shifted it out of Google and they put it in SharePoint. So now it's in Microsoft. And so we've been looking through it and we're gonna.
All my fault.
What?
I said that's all my fault that it's in
Yes,
Microsoft.
Jessica made us do that. So, so what we were thinking was that if Brian and Jessica and Mimi and I could get together, though it wouldn't be a quorum, it'd just be a subcommittee, and look at it together, we might be able to sort of just work through the last things that we that we need to work to finalize it. We took out a lot of the clutter that was, capital S or small s, and we took out all that. I think most of that's gone.
Yeah. Have you talked to them at all? Not because I haven't seen them go in and do anything on the document. I don't know if they're doing it somewhere else.
I think I sent her the extension, the contract yesterday, so maybe they were.
Oh, they're waiting for that. Okay. Because I feel like before the four of us sit down and look at it, they should have done something first. Because there's things they're going to add, like for equity, all that kind of stuff. They're going to do a lot of things.
I will, I'll send her an email and tell her to let us know when they are finish that review, and then the four of you can.
Okay, that'd be great.
They being Cascadia?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
No. Yes.
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
So who's doing what?
The document that was it's in SharePoint. My question to the other members of the committee is, would you like access to that document?
Yes, I would.
Okay. So Corey's going to make that happen. We can't have you at our meeting, Ann, because that'd be fine. But
that'll be fine.
So, so what I'm going to send a note out to Jessica, Brian, and Mimi and see if we can't get a date where we could look at it together. Maybe at, I don't know, Volpine would be my choice. But so we can look at it and sort of make corrections and sort of do our final document. But it has to be sometime fairly soon, given that the 12th is our drop dead date.
Yeah. I'm gone Wednesday, Thursday, Friday.
Okay, let's Monday or Tuesday. Let's do it.
Hey, by the way, Sarah, I'm trying to open that SharePoint and it asked me for an entry code that
Put in your email.
I did.
And then I'll send it.
Oh, then it sends it to me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
It emails you a code specific to you.
Oh, got it. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Sarah, though, so in terms of meeting, though, didn't we Mimi was just saying that we needed to wait for them to work on it. And so the thing is that I got the impression from the call with them that essentially they had some action items, but we obviously also did too. And I looked through it earlier. It looks like, most of the stuff most of the input from the Climate Action Committee has been addressed. And so they may be taking most of next week to do their work.
There may not be that much for us to do. Is that what you're saying, Jessica? That we've kind of done our action items? Yeah.
Yes, that, and also I'm not 100% sure that they're going to provide us another opportunity to review. Do we have another review cycle in the schedule?
I'll have to look at this tomorrow. Okay. I'll look at this tomorrow. I'll start a new email and we'll just get back on the same page.
Okay.
Okay, so, but the good news is it might not take very long. So, right, that's what I hear you saying, Jessica. Or maybe we don't need to be together.
I don't think it's going to take very much more from us, because there was maybe one reference, which I think I might have tracked down, that sounds like Mimi was pulling her hair out about. But it looks like, for the most part, we've responded to their comments. And so really they need to, like Mimi was saying, they need to go in and add a bunch of stuff where they said, we suggested this. And we said, great, do it. So.
All right. So Corey, you're gonna do that follow-up and get back to us?
Yeah.
Okay. And a lot of what we had asked them specifically to do a justice, equity and justice review, climate justice review. And so what they did was say, here would be a good place to put in equity. So we said, yes, okay. So now that's sort of the places that we're looking at. So, okay. Okay. Okay, I think I think we just have a few kind of small things that are sort of wrapping up. One is that I shouldn't say wrapping up. Don't get excited. Well, we had before this grant came in, when we were sort of proceeding in a down one path, we had established 4 committees, and those committees were working with the Planning Commission, outreach to the public, ordinances and whatever, rules, legislative stuff, and
Making this presentation.
council. And then, yeah, so one was community hours. So I think when this new grant came in, we kind of lost that momentum. So I think it's important to have that, to reconstitute those. So I wanted to check on that. I know Tracy and Ann were working on legislative stuff. Is that right? Do I recall that correctly?
I was on it.
So
Yeah.
what?
I was working with you on that, Tracy, but got sidetracked on just getting this document finished.
We all got sidetracked. So yeah. So this is not bad news. This is just sort of asking ourselves: is this where we want to be? Because the council has, in our conversations with council members, they were very interested in this legislative stuff. So I had said we were going to do some more work besides just the list. We were going to look for model ordinances. I want to know if that's still possible. Is that something that we can continue?
I think it absolutely is. And there's been improved clarity on which ones we can actually look to based on some of the decisions that have come down from the various courts, and also the change in legislation. So I think, yes, we can look around the area and start picking up perfectly good ordinances.
Okay, and can you make sure that meeting happens with
Tracy? Tracy, I'll follow up with you.
And put me on the list too.
Thank you.
Okay. In terms of the outreach to the council, it looks like now, I suspect it'll be May before we present to the council. Is that what people are thinking?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Because we won't have a chance to talk about it till the first week of May, right?
Right.
Okay. So, presentation to the council. I think we have to look at the document before we figure that out. But I know that was Brian and Jessica, right? We're working on that. And Linda, were you on that too?
No.
No, okay. Presentation.
I haven't done anything since Brian did the draft because I've just been kind of waiting to see what happened.
Exactly. And I think we have to wait till we have the documents. So, but I just want to, make sure that that's really a critical piece. We've got to make a good presentation to the council so they know what we're doing.
So the two council, I'm assuming you want to just come to a regular business meetings, are the 9th and the 23rd. You have a preference?
Those are May.
What are the dates?
They are May 9th and May 23rd.
Let me look.
And to give you context, our meeting for this committee is, I think, May 6th. No, May 7th.
May 7th. Well, it has to be, no, wait, 2 days.
Right. So it's either 2 days or 2 days and 2 weeks.
It doesn't matter to me. Two days from, oh, I see, from our meeting.
Right.
So then maybe we do the 23rd.
Yeah. debate that, but the answer is yes, that's what we'd like to do. Okay, let's focus on that.
Great.
So, okay, we're, how do we get the, let's see. So that group will meet after the next meeting, right? After our next meeting, when we've had a chance to look at the whole document. Is that right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And Brian, can you call that meeting together? It's you and Jessica and me.
Sure.
Right.
Call it together. I'll call it together.
Okay. And then we had outreach, and that was Linda and Dana, right? And right now, what we have on that, I'm sure you've all seen it. It's the Climate Town Hall is ready to go, and one of our strategies that we've talked about in our climate action plan was collaborating with the North End cities, and this is a collaboration with the North End cities, all 5 cities, well, 4 cities and Kirkland, who only part of Kirkland, so they didn't join us. But Lake Forest Park, Kenmore, Woodinville, and Bothell are all co-hosting it. And Brian is going to be the moderator. Tamara was going to, we need some volunteers for that event. It's on Saturday morning, April 13th. And what we are sort of the structure of that meeting is the elected officials are up in front. Their focus is going to be on climate. What happened in climate in the legislative arena, and then what do they anticipate happening? And as you know, there are initiatives coming up, and I'm sure they'll be talking about the initiatives to roll back the Climate Commitment Act. It's not political. It is nonpartisan, informational town hall meeting. But one of the things we want to do is collect. One of the questions we have to ask is, do we want a table where we put out, sign up for the climate committee and whatever else? If we do, we have to staff it. But we also need people we're going to hand out 3x5 cards on the chairs and pencils, so that if people have questions, they raise their hand and we collect them and sort of sort through them and then hand them to Brian. There'll be more questions than there is time, I'm sure. But so we'll sort of sort through them, and if there are ones that are in common, we mush them together. So we need some volunteers. I think we probably need 2 volunteers. If we have then we could have a table. And anybody else?
I'm out of town.
Okay.
I'll be there the whole time. Happy to do other duties as assigned for whatever's needed for that event.
Okay.
I'm not available that day. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, what? Did you say?
I've got a conflict that morning. I'm sorry.
Okay. Okay.
You said it's the morning. I should be able to do it.
Okay, so we'd like you there at 9:30. So just to make it starts at 10, we'll make sure everything's set up, the sound works, they'll have water bottles. I don't know what they need. And the chairs will be set. The third place comments are going to do the chairs and the sound and all that stuff. So, and I don't anticipate any hostility, or it's just sort of an informational. I always worry, but I think it's just informational. And we should get people from other jurisdictions, so that'll be good. Do we want to do anything? Do we want to put out anything?
Do you put it on social media or?
Oh, well, it's been out on social media, but I meant, should we have a table with a sign-up sheet, or we're not going to collect, I don't think we're collecting names and emails from either.
Yeah, I mean, what would the goal of the table be?
Yeah. Well, it's just if people are interested in the climate action issues in Lake Forest Park.
I think the goal is to get people to this event. That's right.
Two separate questions. Yes, we want people to come, but if we had a table at the event, would we want to have something for people?
Maybe just be an awareness that the committee exists.
Yeah.
And what we do. I mean, it's informational.
When we meet, we haven't had a lot of community involvement. We don't have, we have a time at the start of every meeting for community comments, and we really don't have very many attendees. We're probably just a part of that is people who are attending the planning commission and commenting are all worn out by the time they get to ours. But
well, why don't we put a table out with our banner that says Climate Action Committee, and we'll just sit behind it and see what happens.
And if we have a poster with here's when we're meeting, here's what we're working on, we could recruit student support. We've lost our 2 students. It would be great to recruit new students and to recruit for going forward. It's like, you may be tied up this year, but next fall, think about your
college applications. Yeah.
Question for the moderator. Are you going to mention the Climate Action Committee in your opening remarks?
Oh, heck yeah.
There you go.
Yes.
branding.
T-shirt, right?
Yeah.
It says Lake Forest Park Climate Action Committee.
Yeah, and we'll have that little salmon on it, right?
I would like those t-shirts with the salmon. I think that's going to be a good one.
Yeah, yeah. I'd just like to say the winning name for the salmon was Coco the King. Coco the Kokanee. I don't know that we might want to keep running that. They were all K's. Keith.
And Mary was one.
Oh, Mary, that's right.
Little
Mary.
girl.
Yeah, that's right. She wanted Mary. Okay. Okay, there are 2 more things I just want to make sure people are aware of. Kenmore is doing a program called Solarize Kenmore. And they have they're going to let anybody in Lake Forest Park join this project. And it is a fabulous project. What it does is, if anybody was interested in putting solar on their house, they get a free assessment, they get discounted prices, and so somebody will come out, look at your house, tell you how it works, and then they give you an estimate, which is locked in until the end of June. And then if you decide to go ahead with it, they have vetted a set of contractors who will put in made in Washington solar panels. So while solarizing isn't a greenhouse gas emissions reduction issue for us, it is a grid reliability issue for us. So we're gonna Corey is gonna meet with Nina sometime, the woman from Kirkland, just to make sure we can get this information out to our folks. But it's a really good idea. One of our strategies is collaborate with other cities. This is an opportunity to do so. They do have to, on the form, you do have to say you're clicking in at Kenmore, but so we have to explain that to people. It doesn't matter. It's just Kenmore and the neighboring areas with Kenmore. So it really represents, I think, a good opportunity for people who might be interested in solar.
The other exciting thing about them is they actually do multi-house installations. So if your end of the cul-de-sac wants to get a group one going, they are willing to talk to you about that.
Yep. So that, and I just also wanted to say the book club is doing 2 things. One is the next book is called At Home on an Unruly Planet. And it's what we found is that's most helpful. It's a series of sort of short essays. And the book, we've just ordered it from Third Place Books, so it'll be up
there.
Oh, it is up there. Okay, terrific.
They had them. I'm sure they already have them.
They have them. And we're pushing very hard to have the June book be part of the, Octavia Butler's book, The Parable of the Sower. She lived in Lake Forest Park the last 10 years of her life. It's the 20th anniversary. The book is set in 2024. It's the Seattle Reads program. We're trying to influence the Lake Forest Park and Shoreline Reads program to do that. But it's a lot of people it has a lot of interest. And it's, so anybody you know who's influential with libraries should tell me you want to do this. I talked with Robert Sindelar at the bookstore and sent a note to friends of the library, but I think it would be a good thing. It sort of tells a story about Lake Forest Park. It tells a story about, it's a little depressing book, but
It's a lot depressing.
well, it's a lot depressing book, but it'd be interesting. So we're thinking about that. The other thing is, whoops, Anne.
I just looked at the synopsis.
Oh. Anne's having a great time with this book. So, are you reading a depressing one?
When the world falls apart and people are beset by intense suffering and sadness, many turn to religion for the assuring promise of a better place beyond death.
Okay. So what could be better?
Bit extreme.
Well, it'd be fun. Can't you imagine the third place and people are at tables talking about this? I don't know. It's going to be fun.
I will try to read it.
You know, I tell you the truth, it's been on my bed table since Christmas, so I haven't touched it yet. My kids said it was too depressing. But still, we're going to make a happy time out of it. The other is I just wanted to just say that I went to the council last month and reported on our work plan, which is what we just reconstituted here is what we were doing. And they didn't have any questions. They were, thank you very much. Right when you say that.
Well,
our big colleague missed it. He forgot when the meeting was.
Yes.
Oh,
So,
Let's start early.
Yeah.
Jeez.
Okay, so the follow-up to this meeting is I'm going to send an email out to everybody to survey and see if they're interested in participating on the advisory committee. Corey's gonna do the contact Cascadia and see where they are and what we need to do on that. And then Jessica, Brian, and Mimi and I are gonna finalize this puppy. Anne and Sarah and Matt are gonna, and Brian, of course, are gonna be at the town hall. And I think that's what we said. Is there anything else for that anybody wants to say?
Tamara and I were on the comp plan committee. You didn't.
Oh,
I could just like not say anything and not be
Oh.
on the committee.
that's right.
So I don't know what you want to do, but because that's done, right? The comp plan work, or is that still, we're still on standby?
Yeah, I think actually, but if Mark wasn't here, I'd tell you that we should go to the planning commission meeting and in citizen comment.
He's not listening.
I know.
Okay.
Well, we're gonna do it anyway. I think we have this. I think we have to go to the planning commission and tell them what we did.
Okay, well, go ahead. We'll continue this conversation.
Now we're gonna talk more about that. Okay. Anything else? Okay, next month is going to be busy. We're going to finish the project. We're going to move forward, figure out how to present this and do more outreach. And welcome Dana back. She's going to bring us Tim Tams.
Yes.
Excellent.
They're cookies, I think, right? Australian cookies, New Zealand cookies.
Yeah, that's really, but they still were delicious.
I think we're pretty excited about what the climate action plan looks like. If you haven't seen the kind of edits that are coming, I think they're doing a nice job.
It's like they've done it.
I think you'll be really happy.
It'll look great. I think it already looks.
Yeah.
So our plan is that once it's done, we'll send it out to you all to look at. But the race is over. You can just say how good it is, I think, unless there's something glaring. We can continue to edit it because we'll get it in a version so we can still. All right. Is there anything else? Meeting adjourned.
Thanks, everyone.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.